Hey everybody. As I told you in class today, we have a test coming up next Monday, so we're going to spend the next few days reviewing for it, and we're going to start with addition and subtraction. To do that, we need to know these rules of addition. These are things we've talked about before. Let's start with talking about how to add two numbers that have the same sign. When we add two numbers that have the same sign, we take their absolute values of those numbers and add them together. And then the sum has the same sign as the numbers. So for instance, if we did positive 8 plus positive 7, we get 15. We just do 8 plus 7 gives us 15, right? And because 8 is positive and 7 is positive and we're putting them together, we're going to have a positive sum. If we have two negatives, it's the same way. Negative 6 plus negative 10, we do 6 plus 10, which is 16, and then we add a negative and a negative together, and it's still negative, negative 16 when we're adding. If we have two numbers with different signs, we subtract the absolute values of the two numbers, and the sum has the same sign as the number with the greater absolute value. In our examples here, we have negative 12 plus 7. So we have a negative plus a positive. These are two different numbers. So remember, when we use the counter method, we saw there'd be some canceling, right? These 7 positives would cancel out 7 of these negatives. So we do 12 minus 7, which gives us 5, but we know from looking at our two numbers, the 12 has a bigger absolute value, so our answer is negative. 18 plus negative 4, those 4 negatives are going to cancel out 4 of these positives. We have to do 18 minus 4, which gives us 14. Now, we're going to take a look at 8 examples. If you would like, feel free to pause the video and work on the problems on your own. If you want to, you can follow along with me as we do the steps together. Let's start with decimals because those are not too different from integers. In our first example here, we have negative 4.23 plus 1.7. So if we think about our rules, we have two different signs, which means that we're going to have to subtract these two numbers. And we know the sum is going to be negative because the negative 4.23 has a greater absolute value than the 1.7. So I know my sum is going to be negative. We'll just make a note of that. Now 4.23 minus 1.7. When we're doing addition and subtraction with decimals, we have to make sure that we line up the decimal places in the two numbers. And any digits we're missing, we can just add a 0 because 1.70 is the same as 1.7. And this is subtraction. So we have 3 minus 0, that gives us 3. 2 minus 7, I can't do that, so I have to borrow from this 4. It's going to become a 3. This will become a 12. 12 minus 7 is 5. My decimal just comes straight down, and 3 minus 1 is 2. So my answer here is negative 2.53. Make sure you get the sign right. Now, in our next example, we have a subtraction problem. But remember, we can always rewrite subtraction problems by turning them into addition problems. We're just going to add the opposite of the second number. So instead of minus 9.31, I'm going to change to plus negative 9.31. These two problems are equivalent, but this will give me a better idea of how to do it because now I can refer back to my rules for addition. Since my signs are different here, I have a positive 3.8 and a negative 9.31, I'm going to have to subtract. And I know my answer is going to be negative because the 9.31 is a larger absolute value. So I'm going to do 9.31 minus 3.8, and once again I'm going to have to add a 0 here as a placeholder. So I have 1 minus 0 is 1. I'm going to have to borrow, so that's going to become 8. And that'll be 13 minus 8 is 5. Put my decimal straight down. 8 minus 3 is 5. And make sure I write my answer as a negative 5.51. In our third example, we also have a subtraction problem, so I'm going to fix this one too. Negative 7.84 plus negative 9.34. Now I see these two numbers have the same sign this time, so that means I'm going to be putting them together. I know that my answer is going to be negative because both of these numbers are negative, and I'm just adding. So I have 7.84 plus 9.34 4. I'm just going to add. 4 plus 4 is 8. 8 plus 3 is 11. Carry the 1. 1 plus 7 is 8. 8 plus 9 is 17. And my decimal comes straight down. So my answer is negative 17.18. A lot of negative answers here in these examples. Our last example here. Now this is already an addition problem. I don't have to change anything. I just need to figure out what my sign is going to be. It's going to be negative because I have two negatives that I'm adding together. And they have the same sign, so I'm just going to add them. 4.135 plus 0.670. 5 plus 0 is 5. 3 plus 7 is 10. It's going to give me 8. There's my decimal. And 4. Negative 4.805 is my answer. All right. Let's do one last set of examples here. This time we'll do fractions and mixed numbers, because I know these give people problems sometimes. First thing we got to do with our first example here is change it to an addition problem. Anytime we see a minus sign, we always want to change it to an addition problem. So I'm going to change this to negative 1/3 plus positive 1/4. Okay? Now, since this is an addition problem, we have to find the common denominator. Now, I know 3 and 4 both go into 12, so I can multiply this 3 by 4 and this negative 1 by 4. Remember, if I do it to the denominator, I also need to do it to the numerator. And I can do 4 times 3, that'll also give me 12, and 1 times 3. So now, my problem becomes negative 4 over 12, it's a negative, plus 3 over 12. Now I see that they have different signs, so I know I'm going to need to subtract. And I know my answer is going to be negative, because negative 4 has a greater absolute value than 3. And I'm going to have to do 4 minus 3, because they have different signs, and that's going to give me 1. So my answer is going to be negative 1 over 12. Remember, the denominator always stays the same. There's my answer for first example. Example 2, we just have an addition problem here, so that's actually pretty nice. So let's go ahead and find the common denominator. 5 and 10. Oh, you know what? They both go into 10. So I can leave 7 over 10. That's not going to change. But I'm going to need to change this 5 to get 10 here. I can do times 2. So if I do negative 2 times 2, that'll give me negative 4. So now I have negative 4 plus 7. Once again, we have different signs. In this case, my answer is actually going to be positive, because 7 has a greater absolute value than 4 does. So since they're different signs, I know I'm going to subtract. 7 minus 4 gives me 3. So it's going to be positive 3 over 10. Gives me my answer. Now these last two examples, we have mixed numbers. And remember, when we're dealing with mixed numbers, we always want to start by just turning them into improper fractions, because those are so much easier to work with. So if I do 6 times 3, that'll be 18. 18 plus 5 can be 23 over 6, plus negative 2 times 5 is 10, plus 1 is 11 over 2. Now my common denominator is going to be 6. 2 and 6 both go into 6. So I want to write this here, set this up first. Now 2 times 3 gives me 6, so I got to do negative 11 times 3. That's going to be negative 33. And the 23 is going to stay the same. Now this is another problem where we have different signs. I know my answer is going to be negative, so I'm going to need to do some subtraction here because they have different signs. 33 minus 23, 0, 1, so it's going to be 10. So our answer will be negative 10 over 6. Now I notice here that I can do some simplification because they both have a common factor. I can divide both of these by 2. So my final answer is negative 5 over 3. Our first step for our final problem is going to be pretty similar, except to start, I'm going to rewrite this as negative 2 3/5 plus negative 4 2/3. First thing I'm going to do is change that from subtraction to addition, because I always want to do that. Now, I can turn these into improper fractions. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 3 is 13. So negative 13 over 5 plus negative 3 times 4 is 12, plus 2 is 14 over 3. A common denominator here. 5 and 3 both go into 15. So I got to think here, what do I have to multiply 5 by to get 15? I have to multiply it by 3. So negative 13 times 3. 13 times 3 is 39. So it's going to be negative 39. And I have to do 3 times 5. So I have to do 14 times 5. 14 times 5. That's 20. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. So that gives me negative 70 over 15. Now, these two numbers actually have the same sign. They're both negative. I'm adding them together. I know my answer is going to be negative. And since they have the same sign, I'm going to do 39 plus 70, because we're just combining these two negative numbers. That's 9. That's 10. So our answer is negative 109 over 15. And that cannot be simplified. That's our final answer.